Have you ever thought about taking a gap year, maybe doing some traveling or going on an adventure? Hi, I'm Hanlie, and welcome to the Guide to Gap Year podcast, where we will explore all opportunities for you to turn your gap year dreams into a reality. Welcome to episode 3 of the Guide to Gap Year podcast. Today we have Kaylin here, who is a conservation biologist. He spent 1 year working in Disney and now currently working on cruise ships. Kaylin, thank you for joining my podcast. I'm really happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm really excited to talk about your journey that you've been on because it's so amazing. I can't wait for everyone to hear this. So I guess let's start at the beginning. That would be a good place. So you worked at Disney World, right? And then you also work on cruises currently. How did you get into all of this? Like, how did it start for you?
Yeah, so it started all back in university, actually. So with Disney, I was recruited by the Disney World cultural team through a lecturer at the university
Yes.
that actually told us, listen, Disney's coming to South Africa. They're recruiting for their cultural representative program. If you're interested in working overseas and teaching a little bit about conservation and wildlife, this is the place that you should go and apply for. And I just started off with an application to the team.
Mm.
And when they were over in South Africa, attended one of the interviews. The cruise lines, on the other hand, that came a little differently.
Yeah, I'm curious about that because the university got the first one started, but then you got your degree in the meantime and everything. Did you approach the cruise line or did they approach you?
A little bit of both, actually. So what happened is again through the university, a different university this time.
Mm.
I was busy with my PhD, and I was attending a conference, kind of speaking about my
Mm.
PhD study in Canada, and I happened to share a room with one of our postdoc students from
Mm.
the University of Cape Town, and he was actually an expedition lecturer on these cruise
Oh,
lines,
wow.
and he watched me present, and he came to me one night and said, "Listen, you present really well. I think, have you ever thought of the expedition industry as a career option?"
That's awesome.
I was like, well, I've never heard of the expedition industry ever,
It's a new
so
concept.
a new concept to me completely. I said, oh, let me give it a try. And so he put in a good word with them.
Mm.
I reached out to them. And in fact, after reaching out to them, it was 2019, so just before COVID hit. And unfortunately, COVID came through, put pay to that, never heard back from them
Oh, no.
until 2022.
Oh, so it was
Where
quite a while that you had to
Quite a
wait.
while. Yeah, I mean, from COVID onwards, from 2020, 2021,
Mm.
the expedition industry was completely shut down. There was no ships sailing
Yeah,
to these
because
areas.
obviously no one could do anything.
Absolutely, and so they had to cut down their staff contingent, and
Mm.
then finally they were allowed to open up again. And I received a call, said, "Listen, you applied a few years ago. Are you still interested?" And of
That's
course,
amazing.
well, who wouldn't be, right?
Yes, it's
So
such an exciting opportunity. So, going back to Disney, that was your first program that you did. How was the logistics for that? Like, did you have any expenses? Because obviously, going there isn't free. Like, what was that like going through the application process and getting all your stuff in order to go there?
yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of paperwork. Obviously, you got to go for your visas, and you got to go get all your travel arrangements sorted out. The good thing with the
Mm.
program with Disney is housing is provided.
Oh, that's nice.
They do charge you weekly for the housing, so it wasn't a case
It's
of
provided, but not.
provided.
Yeah.
But what happens is they pay you a salary,
Mm.
a weekly salary, in fact, and part of that salary goes to your housing. So I didn't have to sort out anything with housing, anything. It really had to just be the travel arrangements. Make sure the passport is valid
Mm.
for the period that I'm going to be there. The visas. Because there's a specific visa, a Q1 visa that we have to do to get as South Africans going over
Yes.
for the cultural rep program, and the flights. And the good thing with the flights is, even though you pay for the flights up
Mm.
front, once you get there, everything is paid back to you.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And then you have some spending money when
And
you're
you
there.
got some spending money. So,
That works out great.
it works out really well, really well. So in terms of prepping for that, it
Mm.
was really just getting myself ready for the adventure and getting your head around that you're going to be away, not just
Mm.
away from home, but overseas, a completely different continent, in a
How
completely
old were
different
you
area.
at the time? Because you were busy studying, right?
Correct. I was at the during the end of my my undergrad, so I was probably 21, 22.
Oh, wow, that's also young. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was also 22 when I went over. It's a good age to start exploring the world.
absolutely.
So what was your like job description? What did you have to do um for your time at Disney World?
I went over as a cultural representative.
Mm,
And so at the time, as I said, I had just finished my undergrad, and the whole point of it was I was a qualified nature conservation
mm,
student. And Disney was looking for people to come over on the cultural representative program that were able to speak about wildlife,
mm.
African wildlife in particular, um, conservation, and also African cultures.
Okay.
Specifically, I mean, South Africa is so diverse, and so we had
Yes.
so many cultures within the country. And so the idea behind it was to speak about the Indian culture in South
Mm.
Africa, and how it kind of interacts with everybody else
Oh, that's
in the
great.
country.
That's great. So how did day-to-day life look like in Disney?
So Disney was, first of all, I mean, we lived in a Disney compound, really. So everybody in that complex
Mm.
was working for Disney in some way or another,
Ah, that's
and we
cool.
were all international from all over the world. And so
That's
we would
amazing.
have roommates from, anything from 2 to 6 roommates in a flat, and everybody would be from a different country, which is
That's
really, really cool.
it's cool, but it can be challenging as well,
Very
right?
challenging,
Like
very
living with
challenging.
strangers, like getting used to their little habits, like the cultural differences.
Exactly. I mean, so that's one of the first things was getting up in the morning. There's a schedule of who does what and when, and so you kind of get it. You got to get used to that.
Mm,
And for the role that I was playing, which was Savannah Guide at
mm,
the Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge, we worked in shifts. Being a hotel, a lodge,
mm,
there's always guests that need to be taken care of, that need to be entertained
mm.
somewhere or another. And so we had shifts, a very early morning shift where we'd have to get there, open up the savannas. The savannas are basically outlooks
Mm.
where people go and stand and watch animals. The lodge was designed in a way that it's completely surrounded by what we refer to as savannas.
Yes,
And basically, on those savannas are a whole suite of different African animals. And so, our
that's
jobs
cool.
as savanna guides
Mm,
was to go out, open up those savannas, and get posted, ready to receive the guests. And so, you'd start pretty early with that first shift,
mm.
um, out of bed at about 5, onto the first bus, because the Disney properties are huge, and so
Ah, okay. Yeah, so you don't just walk to where you need
you
to
don't
be.
just walk
Ah,
there. and
okay.
and and obviously, we none of us actually had vehicles coming
Mm,
from South Africa, and so we would jump onto the Disney buses,
mm,
and we would go out to work. And so, to make sure you get there by 7, we had to be on
mm,
the bus pretty early, about 6. Get into the lodge, check in, and start opening up the savannas. And we spend the day literally interacting with all the guests, speaking to them about wildlife, speaking to them about cultures. And then your later shifts
mm.
would actually have presentations that
Oh,
you'd
that's
give at night.
nice.
Yeah.
That's good. So you got to share a lot of information with the guests and kind of like teach them about Africa, I want to say, because there's a
It
lot
was
of
crazy. The
misconceptions.
questions that we got asked sometimes were shocking. You start to realize how the majority of America actually don't know much about Africa in general, but South Africa in
Yes.
particular.
Yes, definitely. We were talking about questions that we got in the previous episode, and like it's amazing. Like, I want to say like small minded, but I guessing like putting yourself out there and actually learning about stuff is the only way to fix that. And Americans kind of like just travel in America, and like not a lot of them travel internationally and educate them, which is why I love programs like this a lot, because young people are getting educated. Yeah, it's just such a great benefit of this program. So I want to ask, like, if you talk to like guests and everything, like, do you have like a set presentation or stuff that you have to talk about, or can you take it like as it comes, like questions they ask you? Are you able to be flexible with what you're presenting there?
So, for your everyday kind of interactions on the savannas, you're
Mm,
pretty much left to yourself to as long as it's factual.
Mm.
We're not lying to the guests. They're pretty
So
happy.
no telling them there's lions in the yard or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
no
Okay.
telling them about our pet giraffe and things like that. So as long as it's factual, they're pretty happy for you to just interact. A
Okay.
lot of the times, we became the attraction. They were animals, they were exotic animals on the safaris, but we, as the African representatives, we became that attraction for a lot of the
Mm.
guests. This, as you said, a lot of the Americans, in fact, not only Americans, there were people from all over the world. A lot of them haven't traveled
Yes.
internationally, haven't traveled to Africa. And so it'll be their first time meeting an African that
Mm.
lives in Africa. And so we became that attraction, and we'd speak to them about life in
Mm.
Africa, life in Johannesburg, life in Durban. And as long as it's factual, we were kind of left to ourselves. Our presentations, on the other hand,
Mm.
were set. So they were PowerPoint presentations that we kind of put together on a particular topic. My
Mm.
topic, if I remember correctly, was actually shipwrecks on the African coast.
Oh wow, I didn't
Yeah.
even know about that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm learning too. That's great.
And so those presentations were vetted, and make sure that they stick to the Disney ethos, which is family fun, because that was a big thing. That was a big thing with
Mm.
Disney that I found challenging, is especially as a biologist,
Mm.
when we're speaking about biological processes.
Mm.
It's very factual. Mating, for example, is a really important part of biology,
Mm.
and you'd want to teach them about mating
Mm.
processes of certain species, and Disney was, they want you to Disneyfy it. When
Yeah.
if somebody saw giraffes mating on the savannah, you're not talking about giraffes mating. You're talking about them hugging each other because they're friends and they love each other. So that was a bit of a challenge. Coming from a scientific background, everything was Disneyfied. It had to be family fun, family fun.
Oh, okay. So that was kind of challenging in
Yeah.
some way. Okay, so Disney is obviously like globally recognized. Was it difficult to deal with like different cultures like coming along through the park? Like, how was that experience?
Yeah. People assume when you talk about different cultures, if you're dealing with an English speaking nation,
Mm.
the culture shock should be lower.
Mm.
Which is not true. It's not the fact. Just because we speak the same language doesn't mean
Mm.
that we have the same cultures. And coming from South Africa, even though I'm Indian and you're Afrikaans,
Yes.
and we would say, we in South Africa we have very different cultures. But
Yes.
if we go over to America, you'll find that we have far more in common culturally than we have with
Yeah.
Americans, because even though they're speaking English. And so there were small things, how you'd greet people,
Mm.
that could rub people up the wrong way unintentionally.
Definitely,
And
yes.
so you'd have to kind of just be aware about
Mm.
how you say certain things and how you address certain topics and issues.
Yeah. Also, like I think like something we do, and I know I've been saying it on here, the word shame. Like we use it as such a cute phrase, like shame, look at your
Yes,
baby. And
exactly.
it's such an insulting thing to say to an American. Like I got really strange looks from people if I use that word because that's not how you properly use it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I guess like dealing with the different cultures and the tourists coming through the park, it's very interesting to learn from all of them.
Mm.
But then also, like you mentioned earlier, like you were sharing a flat with like 6 people. How was that like dealing with the culture in there?
Yeah, very, very challenging. I mean, I remember I had a French roommate, I had a German roommate, and I had a Japanese roommate, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
The Japanese roommate, we hardly ever saw him. He very, very quiet, kept to themselves. French roommates, um, he was difficult.
Mm.
He liked to party a lot. And when they go out, and they were on a different visa, and so they were
Mm.
able to. He was a waiter, or what they would call in America a server
Mm.
in the Epcot park in Disney
Okay.
World, and the French pavilion, and so they would get tips, and so
Nice.
they'd always be partying, and so when they come home from parties 2-3
Mm.
o'clock in the morning, there's no
It's
such
hard to
thing.
deal with that. Was there
Very
like
difficult.
conflicts or stuff like happening, or would you say you all got along well?
Luckily for me, in my particular flat, no, we were pretty
Mm.
good. And although there were times where where it seemed a little bit inconsiderate. Yeah, a quick chat kind of sorted that out. But I had colleagues that had big issues to the point where management of the complex actually had to get involved, and they had to change rooms. People had to change
Oh,
rooms,
wow.
change flats because they just could not get along, and it's because of silly things like that. I mean, as the Savannah guides,
Mm,
our working hours were very different
mm,
to the servers. The servers would work until the
yeah,
park closes, which is maybe 1, 2 o'clock in the morning,
sure.
and that's when they go out to party. With the Savannah guides, we've got to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah, so you
and
cannot afford to go out until late
correct,
or
unless
like
unless you
early in
got
the
the day
morning.
off, yeah. Unless you're off, or you got a day off the next day, you're supposed to be sleeping, and so you can imagine having um, drunk partiers coming home at 2 o'clock,
Mm,
3 o'clock in the morning. It can get on people's nerves, and so yeah, I was
yeah.
lucky. I was very fortunate. I didn't have too many issues, but there were definitely clashes because of that.
Do you have like any advice for people like in a situation like that? Because I know that is not the only program where you like share a living space with people, like the people working on carnivals, sometimes cruise ships, depending on what job you have. You also share with people like how can you like resolve conflicts or use your communication skills to help you in situations like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any one of these programs or international jobs where you're going to be working in diverse teams. Most of
Mm,
the time, you're going to be living in multinational shared accommodation.
mm,
It's almost guaranteed. Um, Best way, and I still deal with it today on my cruise line contracts, is that you set boundaries immediately. You know,
mm.
when you
It's
meet someone,
important.
yeah, the best way is communication. You can't expect people to kind of just guess
Mm,
what upsets you and what doesn't upset you. And so, right in the beginning, when you're doing your introductions, um, set those boundaries. This is what I'm
mm.
like. This is what I do. What I like to do. What upsets you? And and
Yeah.
and and, and think of it in both ways. We often think about, oh, if I get a terrible roommate, it's going to make my life hard. But sometimes we don't think about us being that terrible roommate. And
Yes.
so it's important to set those boundaries and have those conversations with your roommate and say, right, this is what I like to do. This is what I do. This is what I don't. Are there any things that upset you or that you'd
Mm.
rather me not do?
But you know what? That's also hard because I remember someone telling me when I was in the US that I need to speak up because South Africans have like that apologetic nature. Like you apologize basically for living.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
sorry about this, sorry about that. And they find that so frustrating. So it's also like a good way to like reflect on like who you are also. Like, are you making it easy for them when you're sharing accommodation and working with them the whole time? Because it's really hard. Like I did the pairing and living with your job is really hard because you never get that mental break. And even though it's just your roommates, like it's still part of the park, like they're still part of everything. So they're still technically reminding you like you're at work the whole time. It's very hard to deal with that mentally. So I'm guessing like conflict and stuff like does happen. And it's good to know that there is a solution and that the park does assist with problems like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, a lot of these, not only Disney, but a lot of these programs that have been running for many years, they've seen the picture, they've seen the movie,
Mm,
got the picture, they've had these issues before, and
mm,
so they're very quick to kind of step in and give, assistance and guidance where
mm,
this type of stuff happens. But it's really important to just be cognizant of our actions,
mm.
really. It's a great opportunity to kind of reflect on yourself.
It
Really is a great
is.
opportunity. And you're right, South Africans are very, very easygoing. I started to realize that in Disney is South Africans are super easygoing,
We
and we like to
are.
please a lot of the time. It's a good exercise in strength
Mm.
building, really.
Definitely,
Strength
definitely.
building is a big thing.
Yeah. So then, do you have time to travel or enjoy the park yourself, like on your off time, or actually leave the park and visit like neighboring cities or stuff like that? Did you have time for that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So you're not working 7 days a week. You're getting days off, and the coordinators of the program are
Mm,
really cognizant of the fact that for a lot of us, this was the first time out of the country,
mm,
and so they encourage you to travel. They encourage you to take that time off, and they actually work the schedule out with you. So
mm,
to try and give you 2 or 3 days back to back
Oh
leave,
wow,
right?
that's nice.
Which is awesome. And it really is up to you as the individual. What do you want from this program? We
Mm.
had two groups of people that came on these programs
Yeah.
generally. The ones that saw dollars and said, I'm here to make money and that's all I
Yeah.
want. And they worked all the time. They picked up extra shifts. They didn't
Mm.
travel. So they were the ones that never saw the outside of Disney, really.
Yeah.
And then you had people like myself.
Mm.
I traveled every time I got a chance. Every day off, I was traveling. And if it
That's
wasn't,
awesome.
oh yeah, if it wasn't, within Orlando,
Mm.
and within the parks, because also the parks are massive. You
It
want to
is.
see all the parks.
It takes a few days to
It
get through
takes a
that.
yeah. So and wherever I could, I traveled, and I traveled across the states. I went to the West Coast, up the East
How many
Coast.
states did you visit? Do you know?
Oh my goodness. On that particular trip, I've been very fortunate. I've traveled to the States
Mm.
quite a bit, but on that particular trip, um, I did all the East Coast. So the
Wow.
entire East Coast, all the states up and down the East Coast. I did California. I did Arizona, Nevada.
Oh wow.
I even got to Puerto Rico.
Oh
And in
wow,
fact,
that's awesome.
I believe I was the first of the cultural reps to ever travel to Puerto Rico on that contract from
That's
Africa.
nice.
And that was amazing. Puerto Rico was absolutely beautiful. But yeah, it's a case of you make of the program what you
Mm.
want. If travel is what you
I
want, that's
love
what you
that you
need.
say that because, like, a strong opinion I have about this program is if you choose the cultural exchange program, right, then why are you sitting and saving money? Like, why are you not making use of this opportunity?
Mm,
I had a really good friend who did that. She was working in Virginia as an au pair, and she just stayed with the host family the whole time. And
mm,
the only time she left the state was when she rematched and went to another family and she came to visit me over New Year's in Chicago. And that was the only places that she saw.
yeah.
And my mindset is yes, she brought back a lot of money, but you went for a cultural exchange program and you didn't experience anything while you were there. And then I'm like, if that's your mindset, then why not rather stay where you are and just get a job where you are? Because you're doing the same thing that gonna do in the USA, but you're just putting like all this pressure on yourself to go and adapt to a new culture, a new language, and all that stuff. So yeah, my mindset is very much the same as yours. When I was an au pair in the 2 years that I was there, I traveled to 17 states
Wow.
and it was amazing. Like I really like tried to do everything. We had like trips where you had to pack your bag. You can't even do like a hand luggage. You just had a backpack. And we went for 4 days. So you like the same jeans like every day, just like clean underwear and a toothbrush basically in your bag.
Yeah.
But you make it work because you want to travel. Like you're trying to travel as cheap as you can to see as much as you can. And I love that mindset because the cultural exchange programs should be that. Like you
Mm,
should travel, experience the states and the food and the people and
yeah.
everything.
Absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, travel has gotten really expensive,
Mm,
even within countries. So even within the states, plane tickets are expensive, and so it's very unlikely that once you've done with this program, you're going to have another opportunity to travel
mm,
back there. It's not impossible,
mm,
but it's unlikely. A lot of colleagues of mine, the last time they traveled was on that program, and that was
mm.
back in 2010. And so they've never traveled again since. So if you get the opportunity,
Yeah, like
jump at
make
it,
the
take it,
most of
make the
it.
most of it. Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned you like Puerto Rico, but like, was that your favorite destination that you visited, or what would you say was your favorite?
You mean on the program?
Yeah, on the program.
Yeah, on the program, Puerto Rico was probably my favorite destination. The culture was amazing. I'm a traveler that if I travel, food plays a very big role.
Ah, okay. So you're
Very
looking
very
for
big role.
that.
I'm keen for the food, and the food in Puerto Rico was just amazing, amazing. The people, the food, and of course the natural heritage that they have there.
Mm.
We got to see things that you don't get to see often. Bioluminescence in the ocean.
Wow,
Um, Wild iguanas in the trees.
that's awesome.
It was phenomenal. It's a really, really beautiful little island.
In terms of pay, if you have to like compare like the pay that you get, was it enough for you to budget to actually travel with that money that you earned, or did you have to take some extra money with you to actually afford all those travels?
So in the beginning, getting started, when I got there from South Africa, yeah, I had a little bit of savings from South Africa to kind of help me through the first month or two.
Mm.
But after that, the pay was enough to help me travel. Definitely, it wasn't the best. We weren't traveling first class. It is backpacker type stuff, and really doing a lot of research
Mm.
into the destinations that you're going to see how you can do it
Mm.
on a budget.
Definitely.
But it was doable, 100% doable. I think at that stage, um, the rate was about $7 an hour.
That's not much more than I earn. I was just telling people like I earn $4 an hour like on the OPay program.
Yeah,
But it's enough. If you want to, you can do it. Like you get smart, you shop at places like Dollar Tree to get your toiletries and you can buy everything for like $20 instead of $20 per product, like at the normal stores.
exactly.
So you just have to be smart about it. And airlines have like specials on flights, or like if you're really cheap, like we were, you take the overnight bus that's like that has very weird people on it, and then get like on the bus with like spiders in cages and like turtles in boxes, but
Yeah,
it's extra company, but you do it because it's cheaper than the flights, and then you get to
absolutely.
see more.
Absolutely. I mean, if your goal is to go there and get the latest iPhone and new sneakers, then yeah, you're not gonna be able to
Yeah.
travel. But if your goal is travel,
Mm.
it's very doable. And especially a place like the States,
Mm.
there's so many coupons. I mean, coupons is a real thing, real
It is.
thing. Didn't know about it before I got there, and then quickly by the time I left, I was a couponing king.
It's
I
so bad because you get used to it that side, and then when you come back, like it's not really a thing
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
Like you don't I like they put the sales in the newspaper, but like you don't have coupons that you can go use at Woolworths or Pick and Pay.
No,
So it's
exactly.
so different. So how did you find like the challenges that you had to face there? Were there any challenges that came up on your personal journey that you had to face?
Yeah, there was a bit of a culture shock, as I mentioned,
Mm.
with roommates. Certain things that they did, or that's normal for
Mm.
them in their homes, which would kind of rub me up the wrong way.
Mm.
And also being away from family. If you're a very strong family type, you're used
Mm.
to seeing your family all the time. The distance can be difficult. And obviously traveling back home, even on
Mm.
your off, it's not really an option. I mean, there were individuals that did it under really, really desperate situations,
Yes.
loss in the family or something like that.
Mm.
But realistically, you go on this type of program, you need to come to terms with the fact that
You're not going to see them for a year.
exactly, exactly,
I
and
always try to motivate people. If there's money for a plane ticket, rather have them come visit you than you go back, because you get homesick when you get home and then you don't want to board the plane like going back.
mhm,
And you signed a contract, like you have the responsibility to go back. So
mhm.
if there's money for that plane ticket, rather have your parents go and visit you, or your friends, or whoever you want to see.
Absolutely,
No, but
absolutely.
homesickness is a really, really big thing. I do want to ask you, since you were on the cultural like program there, was reverse culture shock for you like a thing when you came back to South Africa?
Um, yeah, not so much reverse culture shock, but we called it in the Disney group. We used to call it the Disney blues. You'd get home and you were all of a sudden no longer special. Yeah. So remember when I said we became that attraction to a lot of the
Mm.
people. When you come home, you're
No
just
one
another South
cares about
African.
you.
Yeah, no one looks at you and speaks to you like the way you did, and that is a very a big psychological
Mm.
shock. Is you're not special anymore. You're not that person. Some people will be excited to come and speak to you about your time at Disney,
Mm.
but at the end of the day, you're just another South African. And coming back to South Africa, when you go on that program,
Mm.
your life kind of you press pause in
Yeah.
South Africa, right? Everybody else carries on with what they're doing. And so you come back and you press play again and you feel like you kind of lost
You don't fit
time.
in. Yeah, it's very, very
Exactly.
hard.
And the longer the program is, the bigger that gap gets. And so that was the combination of not feeling special anymore and feeling like your life was on pause
Mm.
and now everybody's moved on without you. That was a bit difficult. That was a bit difficult to overcome.
It's so hard coming back when you've had such an exciting time
Mhm,
abroad and then your life is kind of like stuck here.
mhm.
It's very hard to like reintegrate sometimes when you come back home.
Very much so.
Yeah, but then on the opposite side, there's also really exciting things. So, what is like a highlight of your time, except for traveling? Maybe like making friends or something in the park. Like, what would you say was a highlight of your time there?
Highlight of my time was the ability to explore the Disney World parks for free.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
And it's expensive, so
it's
you
so
got to do
expensive.
it for
It's
free.
so expensive, and the great thing is, as part of our perks, is that we could take our family. So when my parents came over or friends came
Mm.
over from South Africa, we could take them into the parks for free.
Oh,
And so
wow.
that being able to experience that myself
Mm.
and give that type of experience to my family and friends that I know would never be able to experience that under normal
Mm.
circumstances was very special. We took it for granted when we were there, and then you look at the price that people are paying to enter one park for a single day,
It's very
and
expensive,
it's
and then you need to pay
extremely
like
expensive.
extra on top of that if you want to stand in the shorter lines, and
Yeah,
there's like there's like fees for everything in there.
absolutely, absolutely. And so that was a really big thing for me. And looking back at that and being able to say I had that opportunity to do that,
That's awesome.
that was fantastic. And of course, meeting the people there,
Mm.
we made some lifelong friends.
Are you still in contact with some of them?
Still in contact with some of them from all over the world. In fact, the folks that worked with me, some of the coordinators that worked at
Mm.
Disney, continue to work at Disney, still in contact with a lot of them.
That's awesome. Like,
Yeah.
that's such an amazing part of like doing the programs for the cultural exchange. Like, you have friends for life. Like, people you never would have met are like some of the best people you have for the rest of your life. And that's such a cool aspect of the program. But yeah, basically, if you do like a Disney program like this, you have to choose whether you want that cultural experience compared to the money, because you're not going to get the money and the cultural travel experience, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a choice that you got to make, and make sure you make that choice before you leave. It's difficult to come to terms with it when you get there.
Yeah, it's very hard. So, do you have like for someone that's looking at doing a program like this, like a list of like pros and cons that they should consider when they're doing this?
Yeah, obviously the pros, you are going to experience amazing things. You are going
Mm.
to meet amazing people, um, and if you set your mind to it, you're going to do
Mm.
amazing things, see amazing things, and experience really really cool places. The cons, you have to come to terms with the fact that you're not going to be a millionaire from it. It's most of the time these programs you are going to be minimum wage for whatever time you're
Mm.
going. That's going to be minimum wage is what you're going to do. If you're a person like me, I was never good with roommates. I've never really wanted to
Mm.
share my space. Um, 9 times out of 10, these types of programs, that's what you're going to deal with. Is
Yeah, you have to be open to that.
you're gonna have to be open to roommates, and that for me probably was the biggest con, is having to learn
Yeah,
how to
share
live
your
with
space.
roommates. Yeah,
That's hard.
absolutely.
Is there any advice that you still want to give to someone that's maybe considering this program?
Yeah, do your research. Think about what excites you the most,
Mm.
especially if you want to go to Disney, because the cultural exchange program is just one of their programs
Mm.
that they offer. They have a number of international programs to choose from. So do your research. Go
Mm.
onto their website. They give a lot of information on their international programs website. Uh, Understand what
Mm.
is required from you from each of these roles, and see which of those roles fit what you want from it.
Mm.
Um, and then, like we said, the program is going to be what you make of it. So
Yeah.
really have a good hard think about what you want from any one of these international programs, whether
Yeah.
it's Disney or another program. What is it that you want to walk away with?
Mm.
Um,
That's important.
because coming back, you will come back.
Mm.
Most of the time, you are going to come back. There have been cases where individuals have been poached from those programs
Oh,
for
wow.
other jobs. But the likeliness is you're coming back, and have a plan. Have a plan for that.
The thing that we talked about in the previous episode is like when they do stuff like that, it kind of like puts the program in jeopardy for the next generation, the people that wants to go after you, because you're taking risk, like doing new visa applications, and like you're like staying after your visa is expired, stuff like that, and it really puts the program at risk. So it's really important to consider when you do stuff like that, like getting poached and not following the rules of the program, that you're having a good time, but the people after you will probably not have this opportunity if you don't take care of this program, which I think is a really big thing that I want to advocate for, because I truly believe that the next like 10 generations should have opportunities like this, because it really changes you. It really helps you grow up and like have that self growth and development that you need.
Absolutely, I completely agree. A lot of these colleagues of mine that got poached. I say they got poached, but they
Mm,
did it the right way. So the company approached them. They said, "Great." They left.
mm.
They finished the program, left, came home, and then they went back as part of that. So they
That's
did it the
nice.
right way.
Yeah, it's
Um,
important to do it then. Like, I'm also like, if you fall in love, like, great. If it's real love, like, go back, do the right visa,
do the right thing.
and then you can
Absolutely.
spend your happily ever after.
Absolutely, because it is. I mean, coming on these programs, it's a privilege, really,
Mm.
and we want to keep that privilege going. There's a lot of African countries that the Disney program no longer takes
Oh,
Savannah guides
wow.
from because of that issue. They had a
Mm,
lot of individuals that were staying past their visa period, and now they sit with a big problem, and
mm.
don't be short-sighted. you know yes, this may be your only time you're going to travel, but
Mm.
what happens if you get an opportunity a couple of years from now
Yes.
and it flags up that you stayed past your visa
Yeah,
period?
you're
You're never going
making
to
it
get a
hard for yourself
you're
as
making it
well.
hard. So yes, it is about the sustainability of the program and making sure other people get that
Mm.
opportunity as well. But think about yourself as well. Don't be short-sighted. You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot.
After you finished your year in Disney World, you came back and then you started a nonprofit organization. Did your time in Disney like influence your decision to do that?
Absolutely. When I went to Disney, I was a conservation graduate,
Mm,
nature conservation graduate. I studied nature conservation. I understood. I was very knowledgeable about what we were talking about. Um, and so, in that regard, Disney didn't really teach me more about wildlife
mm,
conservation. But what I did learn is that the people visiting Disney, very international group,
mm.
they were people from around the world, but a lot of Americans. And I noticed speaking to them about the wildlife, about conservation, about Africa. Um, all of them, they know things about, for example, elephant conservation. But every time they'd speak about specialists that they learned this information from,
Mm.
they weren't African. They were American, or they were
Yeah.
European, or they were someone from another country. Some of them weren't even specialists in
Mm,
that industry. And it happened over and over again over the period of
mm.
that I was there. And it got me thinking, why are we not talking about South Africans?
Yes, because there's really smart people
We
here
got
and we don't know
amazing
it.
smart people. We got lots of specialists in all sectors.
Mm,
And yet the general public over there, they didn't know any of them. They
mm.
knew a lot of individuals from America and from Europe, but not once can I remember an African name come up as a specialist. And so
Yes,
that really pushed me to starting the KNAV Conservation Foundation.
that's awesome.
Um,
So what do you do exactly with that?
with the foundation,
Yes.
yeah. So the foundation is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to environmental education,
Mm,
wildlife, and environmental research. And so we set up projects to
mm.
gather data, of course, as any good research program. But it's important for us. What we do with those programs is they're more than just data gathering
Mm,
projects. They're projects that we try to include young
mm,
conservationists out of university, even just general public that want more information about wildlife. We
mm.
include them in these projects. So if we're going out to collect data, we bring these students with, we bring the public with, we train them in what we're doing.
Oh,
If
that's
we're
amazing.
studying birds, or we're putting identification bands on birds,
Mm,
people get to have these birds in hand, see what data we're gathering,
that's
and see
amazing.
how that
I love
information is
that.
used in science. And that's what KNAV is all about: is disseminating this science to the masses, and giving students, very importantly, especially for
Mm,
me, is giving our students, our young
mm,
professionals, early career researchers, an opportunity and a platform to learn
mm.
and become better, to become those specialists that I wish the rest of the world was
Yes.
seeing.
Set an example for the rest. That's really good.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, does your foundation and the research you do like help you make your presentations that you now offer, like as a lecturer at the university and at the on the cruise ship that you're working at? Like, does that help your presentation and staying updated with the information that you're presenting to people?
Absolutely, absolutely. It forces me to stay current. As a researcher, you have to stay current. You have to
Mm,
understand what you're talking about. You have to have up to date information. And a big part of of running the foundation is disseminating information.
Yeah.
And so I do a lot of public speaking in all types of engagements. And so that keeps me comfortable with speaking
Mm,
in public. And that's what I say to all my students, whether through the foundation or through the university,
mm.
is get used to speaking in public, get used to talking to people. It's all great if we go and find these answers and
Mm.
get the results from our research. But if we can't tell the general public about it in
Yeah, if
an
you don't use
impactful
your
way,
voice, like use the platform.
exactly, and
Mhm.
so yeah, it keeps me current and comfortable with speaking to people about it.
So then, I know we talked about getting recruited, like the cruise ship, like how you went about that. So tell me a bit more about your job on the cruise ship, because you currently do contracts on a cruise ship, right?
Absolutely, I am an expedition lecturer and
Mm.
guide for Silver Sea Expeditions, which is a cruise line that goes to very, very special places all over the world. They
I was so
concentrate.
excited when you told me about the locations. I'm like, that's such cool
Yeah.
information. Where do you travel to?
Wow. Okay. So it's a cruise. It's not like a normal cruise
Mhm,
with thousands of people. Our ships are much smaller. Maximum of 200, and I think 250
mhm,
is the biggest ship we have. So it's a very small group of people, and we only go to extremely biodiverse parts of the
mhm,
world, very remote. So, for example, we go to the Arctic up in the north. We explore both the Norwegian Arctic, the Canadian Arctic. We go to Antarctica, parts of the Amazon, parts of East and West Africa. We're even out in the South Pacific, in the middle of those islands, those tiny little islands in the middle of the Pacific that people can't get to. That's where these ships go.
Oh, that's
Very,
amazing.
very
As a
biodiverse
tourist,
area.
that's probably like a really good option to do.
Absolutely. So the tourists that join these types of vessels,
Mhm,
they're generally tourists that have traveled everywhere in the world. They've been to the very touristy areas. They've been to New York
mhm,
and whatnot. And now they're looking for something special, something that
mhm.
is different and out of the ordinary.
So how does it typically look when you take a group out, like on a guided tour?
On a guided tour, the sad part of it is because these expeditions are quite expensive.
Mm.
Our average age of our tourists is between um, 65 and 80 years old, so
Wow.
they're quite mature guests. But a
Mhm,
lot of them, I mean, I say that, but there's some really fit guests,
mhm,
and they need to be, because when we go out to these areas, we're either hiking up mountains
mhm,
or across glaciers, or we're taking a walk along a beach in the Antarctic, on zodiacs, which are
mhm.
inflatable boats.
That's
With
awesome.
very cool stuff, looking for wildlife and things like that. And so they've got to be fit. They've got to be able to keep up with our guides. Um, and we and they also obviously have to be able to have their sea legs.
Mhm.
That's probably an important part.
So weird question, but like when I imagine like the Amazon, I'm like imagining like snakes and like I don't know, like this forest, like trees and like getting eaten by bugs and stuff like that. How do you deal with like those misconceptions in some way with tourists that you're guiding on these tours?
So it's you've got to give them as much as information as possible from the get go. Give them too much information than too little information,
Mm,
because if you give them too little information, and they have built this image in their mind and it's not what they see,
mm.
um, it can get very uncomfortable, right? So rather give them as much. Be honest. Be honest.
Mm.
If it's going to be hot, if it's going to be, you're going to get covered in bugs, you tell them that. Give them the option of, I want to do it, or I don't want to do it.
Mm.
It's completely up to them. But honestly, very bullface honesty actually.
That's great. So when you take people out on tours, like what has been your favorite place to take people out to?
Wow. That's a it's a tough one. Some of the
Is it
areas
hard to
that
choose?
it's so
You
hard to
can
choose.
pick more than one. It's
More than one.
okay.
So, I must say the most recent one that I really enjoyed was the northern regions of Svalbard in the Arctic.
I was just gonna say, I don't know where that is.
That's way up north in the Arctic. When we took a group of tourists out
Mhm,
for a hike on a beach, a
mhm,
very remote beach, and we had a mother polar bear and two cubs come down the beach.
Wow.
Which it was a bit of a rush to get in front of her so she doesn't cut us off from the boat.
Mm,
But it was phenomenal to see polar bears in their natural environment.
that's
Especially
amazing.
here in Africa, you don't get to see bears of any kind, especially polar bears. If you see them in a zoo, it's very
Yeah.
unnatural. So to see that species that I teach, I mean, I teach back at home
Mm.
in at the university, and I teach about polar bears and Arctic environments.
It's really nice to hear this because, like, basically, like, all your stuff that you're doing, your nonprofit, your work on the cruise, like your job as a lecturer, they all kind of go like hand in hand. You can
Hand in
use
hand.
information from the one to teach at the other one. Like, it's so cool to hear
Absolutely.
that.
And in fact, the employers, both the cruise line and the university, they play off of that. They actually
Mm,
want me to go on these expeditions or go back to university, and
mm,
you kind of intertwine it. It's valuable to them
mm,
to have people do that. It's something, again, it's something that you've got to think about when you take on these types of contracts.
mm.
How does it work with my life?
Yeah. Yeah, like, how do you balance that?
How do you balance it, and how do you want it to work?
Mm,
And for me, it was very important that anything I do must contribute to the bottom line, which is I am first and foremost a conservation biologist and a
mm,
researcher. My aim in life is to teach about conservation, teach about wildlife, and make a difference in the natural world. And every choice that I've made so far,
mm.
it was a concerted effort to kind of mesh them together.
Yeah.
So it takes some work. It takes some planning and organization.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we talked about like what life looked like in Disney World. How does life look like on living on a cruise ship and working?
It's much smaller. I'm very fortunate as an expedition lecturer.
Mm,
I'm quite my rank is pretty high
mm,
already as an officer on the ship, and so our living quarters, we actually stay in the same quarters that our guests would stay in. So
ah,
the the
okay,
the,
that's
the rooms are very
nice.
big. However, we do share. We do
Mm,
share with other lecturers and things like that. So there's two of us in a cabin. But it's really spacious. It's really nice actually.
mm,
So very well taken care of. But it is a ship at the end of the day, and you're
mm.
spending on a 2-month contract. You're spending 2 months on a ship. So there's
Is
not a
there
lot
like
of
stuff to do on the ship? Like, how do you keep busy on the
oh,
ship?
there is. So in the crew quarters, we've got a crew bar, we've got a crew kind of game room where we've got pool tables, and there's a lot of crew parties.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, karaoke nights and things like that. We've got a crew gym that we can use. Um, but again, you got to remember why you're there.
Mm,
It's a great job, and it's a great thing to do. But it's a job. You're there for a specific reason. And a lot of us, especially on the expedition team,
mm,
we spend most of our time interacting with the guests. Making sure that they are having the best time they're having.
mm.
So even though I'm there as a lecturer and as a guide, the job goes further than that. Not just
Yeah.
about teaching, not just about guiding. It's about interacting with the guests, because again, all our guides
Mm.
and our lecturers are from all over the world. And so we become that attraction. People
Oh, that's
first time
awesome.
getting to meet a South African, or first time getting to meet an Easter Islander, for example.
Mm.
One of my roommates originally his family was from Easter Island,
Oh,
and so
wow.
you don't get to meet those types of
You
people. And
don't. So that's
yeah,
awesome.
and so we become that attraction, and you spend a lot of time interacting with the guests, which is
Mm,
exciting. It makes you realize, although I go over as a expedition lecturer, or
mm,
my specific um, position is a specialist ornithologist, which
mm,
which means I study birds and I teach about birds. Although my work revolves around
mm.
animals and
Yeah.
wildlife and the environment, you've got to be a people's person. If you're not a people's person, do not do this.
Ah,
You've
okay.
got to be able to put a smile on your face every day. Get
Yeah,
off.
like you're part of like the sale for the cruise ship. If
Absolutely.
they experience you as rude working on the cruise ship, then they won't convince other tourists to also take part on that cruise ship. Like it's a full circle like that you have to think about. Like you're part of the presentation of the cruise ship. So I have a question though. Like you are very experienced in your field, obviously. Like you have degrees and you're like, do you have the nonprofit? You get to travel everywhere. Do you need the degrees necessarily to fulfill that position specifically? Or let's say someone grew up in an environment where they were taught like about all this information about the animals, like someone growing up in the Kruger or something, they would have a lot of information about like this stuff. Do they need a degree to do this, or is this something you can just apply for based on your knowledge?
Yeah, so as an expedition guide,
Mm,
no. What you would need is some sort of guiding qualification. Doesn't necessarily have to be a university degree, but
mm,
it has to be some sort of guiding qualification. So you know how you got the experience in
mm,
guiding. To be a lecturer, they generally want people with a little bit more information.
mm,
So a basic degree is always advisable.
mm.
But you don't have to be a PhD candidate. With that being said, the higher your degree, the higher your rate. So
Okay, so that
you do get
also.
paid more if you have a higher degree in
Mm,
this. Same with the guides. If you've got a guiding qualification
mm,
only, you're going to get paid a certain rate. If you've got a guiding qualification and an undergrad degree and
yeah.
you work up
Okay.
to a higher rate. And it also comes down to amount of time, you know.
Mm,
So for example, us getting flown out to the Antarctic
mm,
on contracts, it costs the company a lot of money.
mm,
But they're happy to fly you out
mm.
for shorter contracts if you have more to offer.
Okay,
Right.
yeah,
So
that makes sense.
you get to play a lot more. You get a lot more bargaining power when
Mm.
you have the qualifications. Is it absolutely necessary? No, not at all.
So your life sounds really good on the cruise ship, but obviously it's not always like so great. There's challenges that comes along the way. How did you experience that?
So again, just like how it was in Disney, accommodation is shared. So and it's
At
far
least
less.
it's fewer like
It's
roommates.
fewer roommates, and you know your roommate tends to be very similarly minded.
Mm,
Our expedition teams are very close. We work together. The things that we do is they're inherently dangerous, and so
mm,
you tend to bond with one another a lot more than what
mm,
you would in a normal program, and so it makes that living together in close
mm,
quarters a lot easier. But it still takes some getting used to
mm.
because you're sharing with a roommate. And the older you get, generally, the less you want to share with roommates. And on top of it, the cabins are small. You know,
Mm,
so that's definitely a challenge. It was for me, and I know for many others, it's quite a big challenge. And of course, getting used to life at sea,
mm.
being able to cope with the ground moving all the time.
I
Um,
wouldn't be able to do that.
it can get challenging depending on which part of the world you're in.
Mm. Is it like to Antarctica where the waves are like so big and the
Yeah, the Drake Passage. Yeah,
yeah.
they say you can either have the Drake Shake or the Drake Lake, and you're hoping for that Drake Lake because it can get bad. You're looking at like 10, 11 meter swells where the ship is literally climbing for a few seconds and then dropping for a few seconds. It can be.
I was looking at like TikTok, the 9 month cruise that was going from like Royal Caribbean,
Oh yeah.
and when they went to like Antarctica, I was like watching like everyone's videos to see like how it was getting to Antarctica, because I heard it can be really bad.
It can be crazy. I mean, I've been in the Drake where it was terrible, where
Mm.
you couldn't leave your cabin, and then I've been on the Drake where it was flat.
Oh,
It's
that's
just,
amazing.
and trust me, when it's flat, you have a great time.
Do you
It's
get
just
used to like that motion sickness
you
if you're on the
do,
boat a lot?
you do. For me personally, it takes me probably the first 3 days.
Mm.
Um, the worse the sea is, the longer it takes.
Oh,
But generally
okay.
between 3 to 4 days, and I'm good. I can carry on with my normal day. Some people it could take up to a week
Wow, that's
to get
hard.
used to it. Very
That's
very
hard on your
difficult.
system.
Absolutely. And then obviously the parts of the world that you're at, if you're in the Arctic or the Antarctic, obviously the trips there are generally done during the two summers.
Mm.
So the northern hemisphere summer or southern hemisphere summer. But either way, it's 24 hours of light,
Mm.
and so being on a ship for 2 months with not seeing that night can really mess with your mind.
Yes.
That was I was shocked. It affected me a lot more than I thought.
It's like when the sun goes down here, it's like dinner time, right?
Yeah,
And then it doesn't go down or it doesn't come up, or and then you're
absolutely.
like, when is like that internal clock that you have that's telling you it's time to eat? It's like you're so confused, like you don't know what to do.
Absolutely. That was, I mean, I found myself just working, continuously working
Mm.
until, and then I would look at my watch, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Wait, something's wrong, you know? But that was challenging for me.
Mm.
But that's obviously very contract specific.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then, opposite to like challenges, I know we talked about your favorite destination to visit, but what was a really positive experience from your job on the cruise ship?
By far, meeting the crew from all over the world. When I accepted the
Mm.
position, my biggest my I was so excited about traveling all
Mm.
over the world, but I didn't take into account all the people I was going to meet and make friends with.
Yes, yes.
My crew, the crew members,
Mm.
have been probably the best thing of this job. The expedition team, but also the rest of the ship's crew, people from around the world. You get you walk away. I mean, you spend 2 months with
Mm.
these people. You get close with a lot of them. Um, to be able to pick up the phone now
Mm.
on any continent on earth and say, "Listen, I'm gonna be here for a week. Do you have a place for me to stay?" No problem.
That's
You
awesome.
know, it's I can literally I can't think of a single continent that I wouldn't have a friend that will open up their house or take me around purely from
That's
this
amazing.
job.
So I want to say, like, I know a lot of young people, they come back and they've experienced like that personal growth and everything. Did you experience that when you were younger, working at Disney and coming back? And then is it something that you still experience when you go on a cruise ship and you come back? Like, I mean, like the experiences you have, like, obviously change you. Like,
Mm.
do you still experience like self growth and reflection and all that, like, important inner things that you work on?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think Disney was probably very big. I mean, it was the
Mm.
first coming out of university and you know, your first kind of foray into the real world. And
Mm.
so the growth was really, really big there. I still find every contract that I have with the ships, I come
Mm.
back and there's some sort of growth. There's some sort of, wow, I didn't know that about myself. You know, I didn't know I could do that. And
Mm.
so definitely by far the best thing is being able to see what you're capable of.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
amazing. I think you never know what you're capable of until you put yourself in a new situation.
absolutely.
Like you're not gonna grow staying in your box. Like
No,
you need to step out of it.
absolutely. And I feel, you know, nowadays the world is so small.
Mm.
There's so many opportunities for us to experience these things.
Mm.
It's really up to us to take them. You know,
Yes.
become good at. And I tell my students this as well a lot is don't get so don't concentrate so much on becoming a specialist in a particular
Mm.
topic or field. Become a specialist at identifying opportunities and
Yes, that's
grabbing those
important.
opportunities. Learn how to sell your
Mm.
experiences. Because if you've got experience in the bush,
Mm.
but you're not a guide, learn how to write that experience up.
Yes.
Understand how to sell yourself. Selling yourself is a big part that I wish I learned earlier
Mm.
in my career, especially if you don't have a degree.
You're very experienced in like the travel and work industry. So there's a lot of parents out there that thinks like if your kid takes a gap year, it's a waste of their time. How would you address that? Like what advice would you give to parents? Because obviously you're using it, like you doing like the lecture job at a university. I mean, you do have degrees, but you can also use that experience you gain from doing these jobs moving forward in life, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Gap years between school and between degrees
Mm.
can be absolutely beneficial.
Mm.
I'm living proof of that. I mean, after high school, I had a forced gap year.
Mm.
It's purely because I was just too late to register for what I wanted to do, and it was forced upon me. But with that being said, gap years can also be very detrimental,
Mm.
and it comes to down to being honest with yourself. Am I the type of person that will take a gap year and make it into a beneficial,
Mm.
advantageous time? Will I go out and do those short courses? Will I
Mm.
go out and experience things that will kind of guide me in my career
Mm.
going forward? Or am I going to just wake up at 12 o'clock every day and play video games till 12 o'clock at night?
Yeah.
And so you got to be very honest, both as the young person, but also as the parent.
Mm,
And that's where parents can play a role, is guide their
mm,
children, help them make better decisions during that gap year.
mm.
Gap years are not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. I've always been an advocate for gap years, especially if the young person is not sure of what they want in their life. They
Yes.
don't know what career they want to go into. That gap year can be the catalyst
Mm.
for a phenomenal career if
Yeah.
it's structured and done in the correct manner.
Like I have to say, like I'm one of those people. Like I went straight after high school to study business management, and I didn't finish my degree because I wasn't sure. I was doing what society was telling me. Like after high school, you go and study, then you get married, and then you have kids. And it wasn't like where I wanted to be. And I wasted 3 years of my parents' money studying a degree that I wasn't even sure I wanted. And you know what? When I came back from America, like I realized like I actually wanted that degree and it was actually an interest of mine, but it just wasn't the right time when I was starting it. And I really could have saved my parents a lot of money. But then the other thing is like if I didn't go to the USA, I wouldn't have gotten that life experience. It's not I want to say it's not all about the degree. I don't want to motivate people not to go and study and stuff, but for some people it isn't the route to go.
Yeah.
Like you need to go find yourself and find who you are, what your interests and your hobbies are, because even like simple things like that like changed my life when I came back. Like I didn't know who I was. I had no identity in myself. I was such an introvert. I was too scared to do anything. And going into a program like that really gave me the confidence to start choosing things for myself in life that I really like doing and like find love for things in life. And I just want other people to experience that.
Mm.
Like you don't need to go the traditional route always. And parents don't always understand that. It's okay if your child takes a gap year first and then goes and study. It's good because at least when they come back, they're going to be sure like this is what they want to do. They've had time to get exposed to life and make certain decisions that's important for their future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I look back at it, in essence, I had 2 gap years. So I had the gap year before I started my undergrad,
Mm,
and then Disney. Disney was a gap year for me
mm.
because when I finished my undergrad, I got my diploma in nature conservation. I had no intention whatsoever of going back to university. I didn't want to be in lecture halls anymore. I didn't want to be in academia anymore. Um, that gap year in Disney
Mm,
was actually what convinced me that I would love being an academic.
mm,
And it was that change that I needed, change of scenery, change of everything to for me to
mm.
realize that actually academia is what I'm
It
good at. I
is like,
enjoy it.
and if you didn't have that exposure, you wouldn't have known that that is what you want to do and you wouldn't have
Absolutely.
furthered your studies. So sometimes it's important to put yourself out there and go get those experiences just to like change your life a little bit. It's important, those adventures in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I don't know if you can answer this since you still work on the cruise ships, but between the two programs that you did, which was your favorite?
Wow. I would definitely say the expeditions are my favorite with the cruise ships, purely because I am finally doing what I've dreamt of doing my entire life,
Mm.
which is traveling the world, experiencing and teaching about wildlife and conservation. I get to go all over the world and do that teaching wherever I go.
Mm.
So by far, I would say expeditions on the ship is my
I think
favorite.
like you've hit like a smooth spot, like where you get to combine your passion and your career. And what's the quote? Like it's something like, if you do what you're passionate about, you'll never work a day in your life.
Absolutely.
And I think you've managed that, and that's really great.
I was speaking to a few colleagues the other day, and they said, you're the only out of our friend group,
Mm,
you're the only one that actually loves what he does. And I was like, what do you mean? And we went it around. I think there were 4 of us. Like, yeah, I can't stand my job. I can't stand
mm,
where I am and what I do. I said, every morning I wake up, whether it's to go and lecture my students at university or to into a
mm.
cab to get to the airport to leave to Antarctica, I'm smiling the entire
Yes.
whatever day it is. I'm smiling, and it's come down to the fact that I took that time. I took
Mm,
that time to go and explore myself and really look at what I'm interested in.
Mm.
I never thought I would want to be a teacher. I never wanted to be in education. I never wanted to teach people.
Mm.
But I also didn't realize that there were different ways of teaching. Well,
Mm.
my life revolves around teaching now, but it's teaching in a way that I'm comfortable in doing. And
That's nice.
and so I found my niche
Mm.
in something that I never thought I would ever want to be doing.
That's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that. Do you have any last thoughts or tips that you want to give someone out there thinking of doing this?
Yes, be open, be flexible, say yes more than you say no.
That's a good one.
Yeah, definitely say yes more than you say no, because you never know what's coming around the corner. And the
Mm.
reality is, you don't know what you don't know.
Mm.
You may find something that is just right up your alley. The only way you'll figure it out is if you're open to these
Mm.
opportunities.
We always say, my friend and I, like, do it scared. Like,
Yeah,
you're
that's a
going
good
to
one.
miss out on so many
I like
opportunities.
that. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
one.
like, just do it scared. Just do it. You're going to enjoy it at some point.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can always say no later on. You can always
Yes.
try it out, and if it's not what it is, you've lost nothing. You've
You
experienced.
can turn around and decide, like, halfway, like, you don't want to do this, but at least you've tried then.
Absolutely.
It was really, really nice listening to your story today, because I feel like you're such a success story that came from, like, taking a gap year, and you're still doing it. Like, even now that you're older, like, it just shows, like, it doesn't matter your age, you can still get something from this. And I really hope that people learn from this, because this was so exciting getting all this information from you. So I just want to thank you so much for being here today.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been fantastic.